Hello and welcome to Real Estate Today. My name is Ed Cox and my co-host is Maria Babicki. We have a great and interesting show planned for you today. The topic is Feng Shui. We have an expert with us today here in the studio. So let's plan to learn about the principles of Feng Shui and how it can impact our lives. Maria, could you introduce our guest and get the show started?
Absolutely. Our guest today is Beth Grace of Beth Grace Design. Beth has come all the way from Fairfield, and we're so excited to have her. She is a Feng Shui practitioner, and the other night I had the pleasure of seeing her as well as two of her colleagues. One was a specialist in home organization, and the other one was a specialist in health coaching, and it was really interesting, and we talked about it all the way home, my friend and I, and it's just great to have you here. So can you tell us about yourself and about how you got into Feng Shui?
First of all, thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm always happy to share Feng Shui information with people. I'm passionate about it. I've been working as an interior designer for about 5 or 6 years now, and about 3 years ago I was reading a book and was inspired to learn more about Feng Shui, and I decided to study formally, which I did do at the New England School of Feng Shui. I finished my training and am a certified practitioner, and it's really changed my life and the way I work. I think a lot of good design principles are universal, but having Feng Shui really gives me extra information to work with and affect my clients to make their homes not just beautiful but supportive and to help them at deeper levels, and I really enjoy using that knowledge.
Great. As we're providing our viewers with overall introduction to Feng Shui, could you kind of give us what is Feng Shui
Certainly.
And where it came from?
Sure. Feng Shui is about at least 5,000 years old. It's accumulated wisdom that really started with an understanding of what makes the ideal location for people to live. Feng Shui literally translated means wind and water. So the primary concerns of ancient Chinese were living in places where the wind was good but not too strong or too slow, and the water was nearby but not flowing too quickly or too slowly. For example, if there's no water movement, you have stagnant water, you tend to have mosquitoes. And the word malaria literally comes from bad air. So they knew that certain places were more beneficial and supportive to healthy life and abundance than others. So they wanted that sort of Goldilocks situation where the wind and the water were just right. But wind and water also has a double meaning, because we're also talking about wind and water as metaphors for the movement of energy, which in Chinese metaphysics is called qi, which is universal life force energy. So in Feng Shui, we're looking at sort of mundane aspects of wind and water, but also how to work with the energy so that we can manipulate the energy and make places that may not be the most auspicious and supportive, we can change them so that they are supportive and beneficial to people living or working in them.
Okay. How does Feng Shui relate to the home buyer and the home seller?
Well, what we strive to do always in Feng Shui is to create good and positive energy. And what's good for a home seller is also good for a home buyer. Good energy is good energy, and we want to strive always to achieve energy that's for the highest and best good of all concerned. So if you're a home seller and you want to make the energy of your home better, more positive, and more beneficial, it's going to benefit you. It's also going to benefit the home buyer. So it's really good for everybody.
Okay. Is it the same as staging or not quite?
No, not quite. I think some of the principles home stagers use are also principles that Feng Shui practitioners use. Especially when it comes to editing and removing excess from the home. I know that when one tends to live in a house for a long time, we accumulate a lot of things. And a stager and a Feng Shui practitioner have fresh eyes in that home and know that there's often too much stuff and it needs careful editing and arranging to be balanced and open. But they're very different approaches generally. But sometimes we achieve similar results, and sometimes we approach things in similar ways, and sometimes not. It just depends on the situation.
Okay.
Great. The other question we have is, how does Feng Shui, are we using it for everyday use?
Well, hopefully we have good Feng Shui in our home and work environments every day because we're living and working in them. In Feng Shui, we have a concept called the theory of relative positioning. So the idea is that wherever you spend the most amount of time, whatever is closest to you has the most profound effect on you. And the places we live and work, we're spending a great deal of time, and so we always want to make sure that they're supportive and that the energy there is good for us to give us the most optimal living and working conditions possible. So hopefully we have good Feng Shui every day, not just when we're trying to buy or sell a home.
Okay.
And then part of that was providing energy to the home.
Well, we always want to have what we call qi, or life force energy, coming to us. It's like not breathing. You have to keep breathing. You have to keep bringing food and air to your body to keep it growing and alive. And our homes are sort of like living entities in that way. We always want to have good qi energy coming to our home on a daily basis. And this is really important, especially when we're buying and selling, because we want our homes visible and we want to attract the buyers into our home. So we want to make sure that it can be seen, it's in good repair, that we're able to get to the home easily, and that it's visible. And when people see it, that they're able to see the front door and are really welcomed and invited into that space.
Well, so that leads us right into the next question, was drawing, buyers or maybe just guests inside the home and welcoming them. That's sort of what you were just saying, but could you cite an example?
Sure. Well, the most important thing is, can people find your home? Is it well numbered? As someone's driving down the street, can they find your street and your house number easily? And if they're driving down your street, you want to know, are they able to see the house? If you have a flag lot, obviously, the house itself is not going to be visible from the road, but perhaps your mailbox is. So you want the mailbox to be in good repair with the house number clearly labeled, maybe some flowers at the base, something that has good energy and really says that must be a lovely, welcoming house that's associated with that number. Very importantly also is, if you're driving down the house and the house is visible from the street, can you see the house? Is it blocked by a very tall fence or very high bushes? Is the front door visible from the street, or are there bushes that kind of cover it? Is it sort of tucked out of the way so we can't see the front door? Is the front door painted a lovely color that's readily visible to the eye? Are there flowers? Is the vegetation on the property healthy and alive, or is it kind of looking tired and old? These are all things that bring energy to the home and welcome people in. So those are just a few of the examples, at least from an exterior perspective, that we're concerned with.
Once you get them in the home, how do you keep them in the home?
Again, we want to bring them into the front door. We want the entryway welcoming. We want it to be unencumbered, so we want to be able to get there. Not too many bushes and things on the front porch to limit your access. And once inside, obviously we don't want a cluttered entryway. We want to be able to come in easily. We don't want things behind the door that prevent it from opening. We don't want too many things cluttering up our entryway and preventing us from moving into the home. It's well lit. It's not blocked in any way. Those are some things that we look for when you first come into a home. And then once inside, where does your eye go? Is it drawn into that room to your right? Is it drawn directly back to the kitchen? Those are things that we look at. How does the qi move throughout the house? And we want it to move to each room in a slow, meandering way, not too fast and not too slow.
Okay. What about furniture placement?
Well, again, we want to be able to get into a room and not be encumbered by furniture. So we don't want to walk into a room and see the back of a sofa necessarily. We want to be welcomed in, and we want to see a room that says, please come, sit down, come enjoy, come relax. We don't want a room that energetically says, please go away, I don't want to talk to you, which is basically what happens when we have the sofa back facing us. It's energetically saying, don't come in, don't sit down. So we want to make sure that the chi can flow into and around the room.
Okay.
Another topic that we talk is terms are elemental balance.
Correct. In Feng Shui, we have different parameters and different tools that we use to look at and understand and read the energy in a space. And the two main things that we use to analyze the chi and the energy of a space is the concept of yin and yang, which I think most people are probably familiar with, which is about the duality of energy, light, dark, hard, soft. And we want to make sure that there's a good balance. Generally, in homes for the living, we want slightly more yang to yin, because yang is life-giving, and we want there to be energy to support us for our daily activities and lives. And the other thing that we look at are the 5 elements, which are wood and fire and earth and metal and water. And we want to make sure that they're also in balance, that most of them are represented, but not too much of any one element. A good example of a wood-dominated room, which I'm sure in real estate you probably have seen, would be the somewhat outdated wood-paneled room with heavy floral curtains and lots of baskets and decor on the wall and sort of a dark room. But we would say that's an excess of wood energy, a lot of textiles, a lot of paneling. So there are things we would do to counteract the wood to bring it back into balance, which I think we would all kind of feel energetically like this room doesn't feel quite right, but it gives us a language to explain how it's out of balance and then use the tools to then bring it back into balance by using some of the other elements.
Okay. How about space clearing? Because when I saw you speak the other night, that's what the topic was, space clearing and clutter. And I think we're all guilty of that.
Well, some to more of a degree than others, but I think in general we tend to have a lot more stuff than we need. Space clearing can be something more physical, like working with clutter. In Feng Shui, we say that I can come in and recognize things that need to be done or energy that needs to be changed or shifted. But if there's clutter, clutter equals no movement of energy. So before we can address most of the other concerns, one of our primary concerns in Feng Shui is removing the clutter to allow energy to start moving again. And that helps all of the other recommendations we have be more effective. So obviously clutter and working with the very dense energy of clutter is really important. But in terms of space clearing, we're also working with subtle etheric energies or energy that you can't see. Obviously, we can see clutter, but there's energy that we can't see. For example, we all use Wi-Fi signals and cell phones. And even though we can't see that energy, we know it works and we know it affects us. And the same thing is true in our homes. We have energy in a space that you can sense and feel, but you may not be able to see. Sometimes that energy is electromagnetic frequencies that can really affect you. And so we work with making sure that energy is identified and mitigated if possible. For example, if you are sleeping or working right next to where the electricity comes into the house, the main junction box, that gives off a lot of EMF, and it can be detrimental to health. It can cause headaches. So that's an energy we can't see, but we definitely want to address. And then the other area of space clearing that we look at is energy that's held in a space that could be left over from previous occupants. Sometimes a traumatic event has occurred in a place and it needs a clearing of that energy. And it's interesting because a lot of times people will sense it and they'll walk into space. This doesn't feel right, but I'm not sure why. But they're energetically feeling the vibration of that event or energy in a space. So we can go in and clear that out so that it's sparkly and happy again.
Do you think invisible clutter is just as important as visible clutter, like in the closet under the bed?
Absolutely.
Okay.
If just because you can't see the clutter doesn't mean it doesn't matter. It absolutely matters. And I'm sure in real estate, this is something you encounter often when someone's trying to sell a home. I think often the advice that is given is to pare down and to clean out closets because we don't want the overstuffed closets. So yes, it's your space. It absolutely matters and affects you. Clutter in your basement, it's not something you may see every day, but it absolutely can weigh you down. So it's definitely worth addressing. And your bed, very important. It's where you sleep and heal every night. So having an excess clutter under your bed really energetically inhibits our ability to get a really good night's sleep. So definitely clean out under the bed if you can.
Okay.
Well, the next question is you've kind of been talking about it already, but we were going to ask is, as you offer design services, feng shui consultations, and space clearing, how do they all fit? And you've kind of, you were just discussing it there, but do you have some examples?
Well, sometimes people have situations in their lives they want to address, and they have goals and aspirations that they want to meet and need a change of energy to do so. So sometimes a feng shui consultation is really a means to addressing their life goals, and we can do things in their space to support them in their goals and their aspirations without redecorating. Sometimes I have clients who really are just interested in getting a new look for a room, in which case they're more interested in design, but I still use my feng shui eyes, so to speak, to use those principles to inform our decisions about what should and shouldn't go into the space, because obviously we want to make sure that even when they're redecorating, that the space has good energy and is supportive of them. And sometimes it's a combination of both. Sometimes I'm called in to address just feng shui issues, but in the course of the consultation, it becomes apparent that some decorating changes need to be made in order to make the space more supportive and more in line with their goals. So then sometimes it moves into a little bit of design work, again, employing our feng shui principles to make good design choices for the occupants.
How about color selection?
Colors. It's one of my favorite topics. I love color. Color is very important. In feng shui, color is used as a representation of one of the 5 elements. So if we're seeing that a room is lacking an element, for example, the wood-dominated room I mentioned earlier, the wood paneling is a classic example. Metal is the element that controls wood. So one of the first things we might do is use a metal color, which is a white or a pastel or a pale gray. We may paint that paneling and in effect use metal as a cure to reduce the amount of wood. But color also can have effect on people, and there have been a lot of scientific studies that look at the effect of color on mood and feelings. We know, for example, that some prisons use pink because it tends to calm the inmates down and it has a psychological effect on us. So in feng shui, we look at what colors evoke what kind of emotional responses, and we choose a color that's most appropriate for the activity in that room. For example, red is a very auspicious color in Chinese feng shui. It's an activating color. It's a color of power and intention. But our bedrooms should be calm, relaxing spaces. So we would not want to paint a bedroom bright red, even though it's a very auspicious color. It's too energetic for a bedroom. So it's more about pairing the appropriate color to the appropriate space. Likewise, we know in terms of food that blue is not a color that's readily found in food. And in fact, we know that blue sort of inhibits our appetite. and it sort of reduces our appetite. So if you have a client who really wants to lose weight, maybe we paint the dining area a blue. However, on the flip side, we know that orange is an appetite stimulant, and a lot of restaurants and cafes use this to their advantage. They paint the interior with orange to stimulate the appetite. So if we have a client who, for example, wants to lose weight, maybe we would not recommend orange for a dining area because we want to counteract that. So it's really knowing what the energy of the color is and pairing it with the appropriate use of space.
Is there any reason when you go through a staged home, it's usually painted the same color? Is it just because you're saving money for the same color, or is there a reason for it?
I can't speak to a lot of home stagers because I don't believe in most cases that they're using Feng Shui principles to inform their design choices. I think in general, what home stagers are doing is going with neutral light colors because they appeal to the widest possible range of buyers. And light, bright colors can be really good. They're neutral, they're bright. In Feng Shui, what we really are working with is not only what's beneficial for everybody, but a lot of what we do is to get to know our client very intimately, using the 5 elements, using Chinese astrology to understand them. We really tailor our approach individually for each individual client and each individual circumstance, and it's very unique to them. So a choice I might make as a Feng Shui practitioner might be very different than a home stager. But there are some things that, reducing clutter and having open space to invite changing energy is something that might be in common, but I think our approaches are generally pretty different.
Okay.
I have just a question with that is, a practicing Feng Shui person, would that person have a house painted all one color? Would you say that would be, would that be typical?
If that's a color that they love and that is most beneficial to them, if they wanted one color throughout their home, that's perfectly acceptable. It really depends on the individual and the circumstances. In general, we want to create an environment that's the most supportive for our clients. And what's most supportive for people is to be surrounded by things that they love, that raise their chi, that enliven them and make them happy. So if their favorite color is blue, and I have design clients who they love blue, so by all means, use a little blue in every room, because if that's something that uplifts your spirit and makes you happy, by all means, you should do it.
And the last question I have on the topic of color, what about the exterior?
That's it.
Yeah, well, we obviously want colors that are going to be pleasing to the eye. We tend to go for lighter colors. Again, every house is different. When looking at an exterior as a Feng Shui practitioner, I look at, are all the 5 elements of this home represented? So depending on the shape of the home and the layout of the home and what's in the environment, we also want it to be in sync and relate to the surroundings. So we can choose colors that bring it into elemental balance. There's really not any one color that's used. It's really a case-by-case basis. We're not going to choose something, though, that's going to be so odd or jarring as to, make people not welcomed to it. We're not going to pick too outrageous a color for the main body of the house. But again, it's what our clients need. It's bringing the house into elemental balance. It's suiting the need of the client and what their elemental makeup is. So it's really such an individual thing. But again, we want to call attention to the house, but not in a bad way. So we want to choose something that's tasteful as well.
Okay.
The next question we have is, what are some examples of environmental energy boosters and zappers?
Well, Feng Shui is really based on 5,000 years of observing nature and really looking at surroundings. And even the 5-element theory is derived from observations of the way energy works as in nature. So we always want to encourage people to bring the Tao or nature into their spaces inside, because we as living beings are part of the natural world. So it's always a good energy booster to have things from nature inside of your space. So living plants, natural elements, things that evoke a feeling of nature, because it is very beneficial for us. It is energy boosting for us.
As we're getting toward the end of the show, we'd like to ask you about some questions.
Sure.
Well, some things that we've heard
Yes.
in relation to Feng Shui.
Sure.
And is this truth or is this fiction?
Okay,
Okay.
fire away.
For example, should you paint your front door red?
It depends. Red is considered the most auspicious color in Chinese Feng Shui. It is a color of power and activation. It can be the perfect color for a front door, but doesn't mean everyone should have a front door. The most important thing is that the front door, the architectural front door, stands out from the rest of the house. If we have a house that is already very heavily, red represents fire element. So if we have a home that's already very heavy in the fire element, we may want to choose another color to tone down the fire element. Maybe we want to go with an earth element front door, and perhaps we choose a bright yellow instead. Or perhaps we have a house where we really need to add water element. We could paint the front door a bright blue, such as the color I'm wearing instead. So red, yes, it could be a perfectly wonderful color for the front door, but it's not for everybody, and it really is a case-by-case basis. The most important thing, though, is that the front door is visible, bright, and prominent.
Okay. Both Ed and I live in homes. He lives in a ranch. I live in a cape. And you walk in and we both have stairs. What's the thought on that?
It is generally considered not the most auspicious feng shui to have a set of stairs right next to the front door or leading right to the front door. However, we live in New England, and this is very, very common. The good news is that although it may not be the best case feng shui scenario, there are things that we can do. We as practitioners have tools in our toolkit to mitigate that. The reason it's considered inauspicious is that the qi, or the energy, goes right out the front door, and we don't want that. We want qi to move in a slow, meandering pattern throughout the home. We want qi to go around the home and not just out your front door. But there are different things we can do to mitigate that. We can use interior design elements and artwork and rugs and crystals to slow down that energy by the front door and bring it into balance. So not to fear, not the best case scenario, but workable.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We can have a whole nother show on this because it's so interesting.
Really could.
But thank you, and thank you for tuning in today, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.